Now, to all my friends and of course all the people that subscribe to the videos, we really have a sad moment, and this is a moment that obviously has been a long time coming. Whenever I have sad news, I try to put it off as long as possible, but today we have to confront reality, and I want to share this with you. For anybody who's ever seen a Windy video, you can really appreciate this moment. Please take a moment and share it with us. Now, I started this business in 1987. I started making videos at the 1987 Nats, in fact, with the help of Ken Budensink, who then, I didn't even own a camera. He loaned me his camera, but I went on to make the Nobla videos and about 800 more. And there's one thing has been with me for all that time. And if you know what it is, you'll really appreciate sharing this moment with me. It's a really emotional moment. Everybody that's ever been to my shop knows I like worn out tools. I love screwdrivers like this that are all nailed up and worn out. And I mean, what these tools tell me is that something got done, or that in some strange, ridiculous way I accomplished something with the time I spent here. So I've always had this little pet thing to have worn out tools in my shop and save them as long as possible. But there's one tool that right now has to be replaced. And I guess you all know what it is. It's the old video camera, and if you can see, this camera's been with me for a long time. You can take a close look at this. We never get to show the camera on video. The camera has done a lot of work, I think, in my own way, and I mean, this camera has done it. In its own way, it has made the world a stunt, something that we've been able to share. This camera is worn, trust me. Carlos Serra has repaired this so many times, he calls it the taxi cab of cameras, and I think he's right. And if you've ever, it's got epoxy on it. It's got epoxy up on the button from trying to shoot things while you have epoxy on your gloves. This doesn't work anymore. I have to have rubber bands to hold it back and whatever, but that's not the purpose of the story. After 12 or 15 years, or how long it's been, since 87 anyway, what's happened is I really have to buy a new camera. Now, it wasn't that easy. Just go to the store and buy a camera. I wanted to get an AG-188. I want to have the same camera because I've tried shooting with little cameras and digital cameras, and they never are as easy to use as the big heavy camera. For some reason I'm comfortable with this. It's a taxi cab I'm used to driving. And I finally, through Carlos Serra, found a camera I could buy from the Board of Education that is now going to replace this. This will be our backup camera. But what happened, and this is the reason I wanted to make this little announcement here, what happened in the course of shooting the last week of things that we did on the A26, I was using this camera and it failed to record the sound. So we have a lot of pictures, but what I want to do is skip through what amounts to be 2 hours of video. I'm going to record it with this camera. Now, the sound never got recorded on a tape, so I can't really use it. And one of the things, as I go through the tape, I'm going to try to condense it down to about 10 minutes, just so I'm not leaving pieces out, because that's a story, and like anything, there's a chapter here. And I guess the thing I can do is I'll save that master tape, full-length original tape. Anybody that would like to watch it, just that the sound is of such a poor quality that, and I'll be glad to give anybody a free copy of it. But I'm going to try to narrate it and take pictures through a new camera. And so, boy, when I say goodbye to this camera, and I'm hoping our new one is going to just be fabulous. I'm just hoping that in the best of all worlds, we're going to get 15 or 18 years or 12 years or something out of this camera. But I've always found that shooting with a big size camera, and in this case it's an AG-188 Panasonic, if I only knew back in 1987 how many videos I was going to shoot, maybe I wouldn't have been so happy. I don't know. But I've made my little contribution back to the world of stunt. I still enjoy shooting a video, but as you can see, we've had to buy a new camera. Now what I'm going to do is try to condense this down. So just bear with me and see if any of this is doable. We'll try to get it down at 5 or 10 minutes, but I don't want to leave out any of the steps. And then we'll put the steps in We do have the first flight of the plane, and we do have some other things, but I want to keep them in sequence just to keep the story alive, because there were a couple of eventful things the first day of flying, and you might enjoy sharing them. So again, my apologies for in the past we've had some intermittent bad sound. Hopefully we have a new camera now and we will not have that in the future. So let's finish up. Now again, this is a little awkward, but I don't want to belabor it, but I don't want to leave out any steps. What we did in the week that the camera actually went bad was we buffed out the wing. And most of the information and little tricks and tips that were on that information and tricks and tips and whatever is on the video before it also. So I didn't want to belabor that too much. And what had happened is during this week, I was anticipating maybe getting to the field to really even get it flown for the first time, since the weather was incredibly nice. Here you can see I'm buffing it out with socks, but it's an old technique, Gorham's of course, and I wound up spending the better part of the week getting it ready, buffing it out, and doing all the little detail work. You can tell I was getting faster and faster at doing this. And when you're in a rush to get a plane buffed, believe me, it's easier to just fast forward the camera than it is to buff it that quickly. But I did get the wing buffed. On to do a little hinging dissertation of dyeing the hinges and installing them, and that's very similar to all the other planes. We do have, again, I have this whole tape, and I guess I've kept this camera like the tires on the Windstar with 90,000 miles. I should have replaced them a lot sooner. I guess I should have replaced this camera 10 years ago, I don't know. But I love my camera. I love old worn out. Try to put this in John Grodak's museum. Anyway, we installed the hinges in the typical way we do on every other plane. The old trick of packing hinges with epoxy. Gluing the hinges into the flaps and elevators first, letting them dry, getting them lined up. And by the way, Noel Drinbeck in the last Stunt News wrote a great thing on hinging. Excellent. But again, we do have the whole copy of the tape for anybody that really has missed any of these details in the past. But I just felt without the sound, 2 hours is a long time to wait. And of course we lubed up the hinges before gluing them in. Kind of easy. Got this on fast forward, that's why it looks like. If I could work this fast, geez, I could put Tom Morris out of business. Not really. Anyway, the chain lube, the PJ one. Tell you, when a camera goes bad, you can't really complain after, well, so many years and so many tapes. Wow. We got the hinges all dried up, ready to install. I always try to use slow drying epoxy, so I got plenty of time to not have to panic when I set the hinges in. The biggest trick of all is to glue them into the elevators or flaps and let that side dry before. Line it up on it with a straight edge before you put the other side in, and clean off all the extra alcohol with a Q-tip. Now Noel in his article said he puts epoxy in the hinge slots and then nothing on a hinge. I haven't done that. It's a little sloppier doing it the way I do, but I think it seals. Also, that oil doesn't get in there too, which is kind of well, it's a factor. The part that really matters, getting them lined up with a ruler or straight edge, you just lay them up on the table, and with a Kleenex, with a Q-tip and alcohol, get all the epoxy off that you possibly can before it dries. I think that's your best shot at getting some really nice hinging. And the way this ultimately wound up, we really did get a nice hinging job out of this. And in my case, I love the black hinges. I just don't like to see white hinges. We also got that same day, we got our props from Jerry Phelps. Jerry's making some really nice props for 35 to 40s, and they're 2 blades. I think they're from a mold that Bob McDonald made, but I'm not sure. But the 6165 prop, all the guys in Texas were using these, Frank McMillan, Rich Oliver. Everybody seemed to like them. So I wound up getting a bunch of them that we're going to test up in our area and see how they work. Now once you have one side of the hinges glued to the elevators and they're in solid, getting the other side glued in is really a snap. And again, Q-tips and alcohol to get off all the extra epoxy. And where the lucky boxes are, we put a little bit of wheel bearing grease. And of course checking when everything is dry, putting a little chain lube in there, making sure everything nice and free. And that was a good point that Noel made in his article. Repeated everything the same on the flaps. And that pretty much got one of the other big steps out of the way, all the hinge surfaces. And this was the first time the plane was starting to come together, that we could really look at it and view it in one piece before we made the landing gear. Of course, all the hinge lines are sealed right from the first day. I've learned how important that is over the years, especially with semi-scale planes, planes that have small wings relative to their weight and drag. Hinge line tape is always a must. Cool, we were just seeing for the first time during that week what the plane was going to look like in one piece, all buffed out. Here we don't even have the motors in yet. Tanks and motors. But I had a feeling I would, because of the way the weather was and things like that, we were going to get to fly it that weekend. So I kind of, at this point in time, pushed a little harder than I normally do. I just wanted to get it down to the field while we had this gap in the nice air, relatively nice air. Using the jigs that I had already made to establish neutral, made up a push rod. The jigs really proved to be helpful in establishing neutral and getting a push rod right without having to make all kind of adjustments on it. It takes a lot less time to make the fixtures up and the things to establish neutral than it does to make 10 push rods, that's for sure. This is a new kind of push rod that I'm using, and I'll do this again on a future tape, the step-by-step of this. I'm using the ones that Les had gotten. They're a little bit thinner in diameter, a little bit lighter, and I had invented a little way to get the end on with a little carbon fiber wrap that seemed to work well, and the push rod came out lighter than a traditional arrow shaft. So again, if we had the sound on this tape, it would be so nice. Got my own little system for the ends, wrapping them with carbon fiber and inserting the wire down into the tube halfway. And this worked out well. I did a little stress test out in the garage with this, and I think this is going to be the way we're going to do them in the future. But again, we'll try to cover this again on a, well, unfortunately, news I have to report too. In the last couple of days, I was out at a communion, and Rich Jacobone crashed his Stuka, so we're going to be repairing that on video soon too, I think. But Rich has his new one ready to fly this Sunday, so maybe we'll get to see it. I have a tricky little tool with a sanding arrow shaft and some sandpaper to set the clearance so that the push rod would just go near the formers but not touch it, and that worked out well too. That was another little trick I put on that video. Of course, always solder everything up with Stay-Brite solder and deflux it with baking soda and water. Best things to do is get some tip weight in it, get the engines and tanks installed, the cowls mounted, cut all the holes for the cowls. Getting the motors installed, tanks shimmed for our initial shimming, the overflow vents. See, what happens is I never play a tape back. Once it's in the camera, it's in there. So had I known halfway through this tape the camera had already gone bad right in the beginning of the tape, could have salvaged the sound on all this, but that's life, the life of Windy. A little port and polish job on the headers. Get them to flow a little better. These are the Scott Dinger headers. Install pressure fittings. That's all on that tape too. And of course the last thing then, once you have that established, you can cut the holes for the cowls. Some excellent tips on how to cut needle valve holes and glow plug holes, and make a template up so you could replicate it. Well, just aggravates me that this didn't come out. And that was one. We did the first one and made a pattern for the second one. It was also on Mother's Day, and we had the family over and had a real nice party. Got a couple of minutes of the kids planting in the garden. Karen planting her plants. Always like to record the yard before we get all the plants planted, and then of course after. We got the fish pond, the fish are eating, and we have baby cardinals. We have a nesting pair of cardinals right in our backyard, right in the entryway, and we're going to be following that for the next. They typically sit on the eggs for 2 weeks, and then the birds are in the nest for 2 weeks before they fledge. Our wisteria was growing. The fish made it through winter without losing a single fish. It was a really, really rough winter too. This week I came up with this little way of setting a needle valve hole by putting a piece of music wire through the spray bar and then just running it inside to the point where it hit, and that seemed to work well. We got the holes cut in the cowls, and right now we were coming down the home stretch. The next couple of days, all I could think about day and night was to get this ready. And the weather was cooperating. Everything was going my way, except for one thing, and you'll see that on the tape. One thing, I just didn't get them all. Pattern to go around to put our holes in, and it turned out, a couple weeks later, it turned out that we were really glad we made this pattern up, and you'll see why. I don't want to let the cat out of the bag here, although it's probably out on the internet already. Because we got the whole inside of the cowls painted black, make it look a little more prototypical, and right now I was just foaming, if you could only imagine. We were hours away, just a few days away from getting, I had to make landing gear of course, and we would be ready to put it up on its feet and take the first pictures of it. Bending the wire up for the gear and making templates for everything proved to be a little more work than I thought it would be, because I didn't want the gear to be any longer than they had to be because of the vertical CG. I tried to get the gear as close up to the body and still look good as possible. But what happened, the first set of gear didn't give me enough prop clearance. I wanted about a ½ inch of prop clearance, and I didn't have enough, and it was chewing up the tips of the prop. So one of the things I'm going to make in the future, probably on this video, is a set of gear about a ½ inch longer. But I didn't want to have the gear way down low. It just distorts the vertical CG. And again, we spent a lot of time laying out the gear and making the details. And thanks to Ed Cotton, a lot of that detailing, well, we don't have the sound, but a lot of that detailing, we used his styrene, and I made what I think is a really nice set of gear. Ultimately realized one of the things from doing this back and forth, I would need another set of gear for flying off grass, because from time to time we do have to fly off grass. So I really probably am going to wind up having to make 3 sets of gear for the plane, but it takes about a day to make a set and do the detailing. And thanks to styrene and thanks to Ed Cotton, that styrene is to die for. And we're going to get some of that. In fact, when I make the grass gear, I'll just do it in real time instead of this like quick fast forward thing we got going here. Silent movies. All we need is Buster Keaton to jump out of the plane now. Nice pictures that Walt Russell sent us. They're on that video. We've already sent them to Stunt News, so we can't even re-record them. His Rare Bear and his original Cardinal with the Cardinal paint job. Walt Russell, by the way, right now is building a Tiger Cat. And we've been corresponding every day as he's putting it together. The system proved to be one of the things that I needed to redo. On the original motor run-ups, the plumbing didn't work out the way I was happy with it, and I had to do a little bending and cutting, but this was the original. weighed the model for the first time with all the extra parts, and it was just a little bit under 70 ounces. But I'm sure it's going to gain an ounce or two, and you'll see why further on in this tape or the next one. It may gain 2 ounces, I don't know. But it started out being just under 70 ounces with 2 ounces of tip weight and the 3-blade props. Believe me, that styrene is the way to detail gear. That works so well. We made the little scissors and the knuckles and everything out of styrene. It just works so good. Can't thank Ed Cotton enough. He even gave us the styrene. I mean, all I need that could be better than that is if he come down here and do it for me. And he has promised me to make me a little A26 for my model railroad. Now that I've said that on camera, he better to get it. Most of the detailing right out of the book. Made balsa wood struts, styrene little parts. Worked out pretty well. Again, all the details got left in the other camera. Are using up some of the Ed styrene to make the detail parts. With the struts out drying that same day we made them up. We'll be making in the near future some more scale ultralight wheels. We didn't have time to make them up, and we were looking to get the plane flown, so I just used ordinary Dubro wheels for the first flights. But that's one of the things on our agenda, is to get those replica of what is on the B-25 right now, the ultralight wheels. Here we are launching it for the first flight, and we'll get some of this in real time. I do have this on another tape. This is some real time of the first flight. Look at what's here. The proud parents. I love these geese. We really love them, except, well, we don't really love them. They make our field a little dangerous sometimes. Very cute. Baby geese. Anyway, we really waited a long time for this day, and if the weather holds out, everything's been wet. I don't know why, it rained last night or whatever. So we're going to try to get the engines run minimum and maybe even get a few flights. This is the entrance to our new flying field in Richfield Park. And it's kind of an exciting day. Look at another goose. Geese everywhere! What? Look who's out.
For the brand new kids in town.
Boy, am I so intrigued.
From the
baby geese.
They played the game their way. By hook and by crook, they wrote a new book. They were around. I'm talking.
But geese are a problem here.
Roger Craig.
They tend to fly around the flying field once in a while. No, anyway, let's see any babies here.
Thomas, Charlie, Neil, and Wes. Al Jackson.
And we'll see what kind of day we get going here weather-wise. Well, our master plan here, and you can see we've still got about half of the field we got to level. Plenty of puddles. Going to try to set up. Going to try to run the outside engine, the inside engine individually. Then run both engines at once on the ground. Basically get some idea about the fuel consumption, the time. Not that it's real critical right now, and then hopefully get a flight. But in the meantime, all the other guys are here. Brian's here, Rich Jacobone, and as you can imagine, the tension mounts as we want to see if if luck is going to be on. Lady Luck is on our side today. It looks like when I put bigger props on this, I'm going to want to make longer landing gear. The amount with the 10-inch props of prop clearances, I would think probably even a little bit less than what I want, but I made these whole gear up in one day, so it's a one-day project, and then I can use them on grass. Hopefully, if I have to take off on grass, like at Brodax, I'll have the option of doing that. And with that styrene, the Ed Cotton styrene, that's just been fabulous for doing this kind of stuff. And as it sits out in the sun, this is the first time we've ever had it out in the sun. The finish really looks nice in the sun. Happy the way it came out.
The nose will move around while we're starting it. Otherwise you can't get the battery body. It needs brakes. Let's see, left-hander. Let's see, it's not even choking. Okay, you in right about it? Well, we got it. The pressure line inside the cowl isn't going behind the engine. I didn't tuck it back, so be bouncing into the prop.
So
No, it's supposed to go behind the Venturi. Obviously, I didn't do that.
wow, they're not staying there. What are they doing?
So there's the reason the motor goes wing. Check that out. What does that mean? Why we run things on the ground?
Reminds me of Prather's good fuel line.
So I have to make sure, number one, that that's behind the motor every time. A little exciting. Nothing we can't handle. We have more tubing.
The tubing was already cut right through.
Now that I said the name, it reminded me, for those that want one, Prather is making another run of pitch gauges. But
Oh, yeah?
they're only going to be sold to Darrell Cady.
Oh, Rich Oliver's making a nice pitch gauge
No,
too.
he's not.
He gave up on it?
Yeah. He's the one that told me to check Katie's website.
Oh, okay.
He just hasn't gotten around to it, and he's not going to get around to it, and, you know.
Well, he's overloaded, believe me. We were just down there. Now, what's happening is you can see this has rubbed, I don't know if you can see this, and cut right through the tubing. As soon as it cuts through the tubing, it's not on pressure. You heard it go lean about halfway through. And I probably should have shut it off then, but hey, we could replace the tubing. And then the next thing is going to be to run both engines at the same time and see if they hold. They seem like they were holding the setting pretty well. So there's how much was worn through on the tubing from that bouncing around in that outer engine. Well, we're going to replace the tubing and then we're going to run it with both engines, and then we pretty much should be ready to fly. But these are the kind of things you like to have happen on the ground, not on the first flight and have it go ballistic or whatever. Ready for we replace the tubing and we're ready for the double engine test. The world famous double engine test.
when that tube got a little bit of drop.
No, but in the beginning you see the
Cycling a little more. Yeah, it got leaner. Well, after I get a couple of flights, I'll when I come home, I'll clean the filter down. That's always a big thing. I see the wind is coming up. It must be time to fly. Boy, you can tell that every time, you know.
It's nice, but it ain't gonna...
It's not going to stay nice for long. It knows we have a plane to fly. It knows.
Are you ready to go when he comes down, or should I jump in one more?
No, I'm going to run the engine.
Oh, okay.
Take another flight.
I know you want to get that up before it gets bad, so...
Nah, it won't matter. It won't matter. Get the engines running. If I get them both running at 10.5, I'll be happy. If not, there's always tomorrow. Getting rid of that tubing issue was an important thing. I'm glad we got that. You know, before 10 flights or 10 leading runs, and maybe shutting off the burner. The other plane doesn't have that. You know, the snakes around, you don't have that issue. This one I do. Maybe think about re-engineering that.
Bracket on the back plate or something?
Well, I put a zip tie in there to hold it. I'm not sure that's the answer. I'll find out. You all set, Brian?
Yep.
Okay.
Especially when it starts lunging like that.
The needle valve on the outside is loose. Other than that, we're going to tighten it up, and well, we got to make lines up now. That's another thing. First flight. First official flight of the A-26.
It's up about, I would say, a good 2 inches. 4 feet. Just need the flap.
You just gotta figure out which flap.
Yeah, I've had 4 flights already.
But you're important.
Huh?
That's because you're fucking important.
That's because I work the hardest.
Because he tells me to be out here at 8, when I drive in at 8 o'clock, he's already in the air. That's right. Oh, yeah. I heard the noise, but I couldn't see it. It was absolutely
All right, Mr. Dooley. Got another one.
We had a minute and 24 seconds between the two motors. Not that it matters. We did Rich on the inboard.
Rich on the inboard.
Yes. Yeah, it was lean.
Well, that's the inboard. Once I get them, if they show up, then I know how much I can take. I'll take them. Yeah. But I'm going to make smaller tanks as soon as I know how much food. I just inboard here, outboard was lean, and it ran a little. I would. Then again, we can get Richard. I'll go over and stand by the camera and make little comments like that. You know, unlike the B-45, the Vance why it sounds like it's a glider, yeah. Never had that.
Is that much lighter than the other one?
10 ounces.
CG looks about right.
See if the camera's still running, yeah. Well, that was the first flight. We need a flap tweak. We need to lean out the inboard engine, richen the outboard engine, and probably make some smaller tanks. So we'll just take fuel out for the next flight. That was the first flight. Okay, we got the second flight of the day on the A-26. Getting the battery light just for Wendy's advisement. I'm sure I'll be able to get this flight in. Okay, sorry for the abbreviated flight 2. Motors were rich anyway, we didn't miss anything. For this flight, we tweaked the flaps up on the outboard a little bit more and tweaked the needle valves a little bit more. have inverted flight for the first time. Wing down. We got to go back. Luckily, we got some video and see what happened. It looks like the motor mount bolts either came out or broke or something, but luckily we have a mold for the cowl, and, well, what can I tell you? That's an exciting. We're lucky we got it down without that flying into the fuselage and chopping up a part of the fuselage.
Or a person that was standing here. Of course, that wouldn't.
Yeah, that would, nah. Catastrophic failure, and we're going to pull this completely apart. I really have to be very careful about getting that apart. Want to take that apart, obviously, we're going to either have to make or repair a cowl. That's what's coming. The bolts were not in place, and I think what happened is I just failed to tighten these bolts. I think that was part of my own problem. The other engine is perfect. It's as solid as can be. But again, that has really put a little setback into our program here. Even Chicky has a little setback. But luckily we have the video to look at, so I can kind of analyze the video. And by looking at the video, maybe I can see where exactly or how this whole thing occurred. Now what I'm going to do is put new bolts in there, longer bolts, and put double lock nuts on them. And I'll do both sides, of course. Just as a way, and to keep flying it, I'm just going to do a temporary kind of repair on the cowl. This is my nose cone piece that comes on there. And also, the other thing I'm going to do is, this is a 2 1/4 inch wheel. I'm going to put a bigger nose wheel on the plane. I want to have a little more prop clearance because this prop is now destroyed. And what I have to do is the only other two good props I have are on the B-25, and I'm going to have to borrow them for the next day of flying. So we'll try to get all this little repair done and try to analyze the video and see exactly what happened and what maybe we could do to keep this from happening in the future, or pass on some information to you. Now you can see the damage, and what I think maybe I can do is keep this cowl for a spare. And what I'm going to try to do is, somewhere later today, put this back into the mold, and then maybe use some Bondo or something that I can make this a spare. I'm not sure I can, but it'll just be worth having. I need to use the pattern to make up the new motor mounts, of course. That's another thing. The new cowl mounts. But in the meantime, none of the bolts are actually in place. When this shut off, the only thing holding this motor in was the needle valve and Scott Dinger's exhaust pipe. So I kind of think, and maybe we lucked out here because the damage could have been so much worse had that gone and hit the fuselage. And it really is only about less than an inch of prop clearance. If that prop sailed off in that direction, this could have really been a major, major thing. But this is just one good reason why having a cowl mold. I think I even have a few spare cowls. Well, I have my Costellos anyway, and I can just mold my own. And in the meantime, should be able to fly this in the meantime anyway, just using the old beat-up cowling.
Okay, we turn the machine.
I think we check the tanks as we're going to re-shim them a little bit. I'm cleaning them off with M600, pressure check them. This had, from the motor being loose, had chewed up this vent. But luckily I have a spare tank anyway, but I just would want to check that it didn't loosen that vent up at some future time. And we're going to shim it about half of that amount, I think a 1/16 of an inch. It was running richer, inverted and right side up, in a little bit of a pattern that I did before that outside engine came loose. But hey, that's how you learn. That's how you learn to tighten bolts. And that's why, like I said, it's always a great idea, no matter how in a rush you are to go fly, and run things on the ground, let them vibrate, let them shake, and like me, check them twice, don't just check them once. Actually, with any new bolts, new nuts, new anything, they loosen up after a couple of flights, and had I come home after the last flight, I would have automatically tightened that up and saved myself this big repair. But in the meantime, I took the extra flight, and I think we have some of it on video. We actually have some of the flight. The battery did go dead. In fact, we used all three of our batteries were like half dead here. So what happened, I might have saved this whole episode, but in the meantime, it looks like it's going to be just a fun plane to fly. It really had a really nice hard corner, and really it looks great out on the end of the lines. It's going to be fun just watching it go through a stunt pattern. A great way to make one of these repairs go a lot faster. Get some of this. When I was down in Texas, Edie Oliver introduced me to Monterey Jack cheese with peppers and some pepperoni. It makes any repair, especially I'm going to have to fix this prop too. These props are so hard to get, and I went and chewed one up. I can't believe it. What I'm going to do is use some extra long bolts. These are number 8 bolts. Put them through the blind nut and make sure all the blind nuts are. Sometimes when you over tighten them, it's just as bad. They strip. And then put a castellated aircraft lock nut on each end. And I have the lock nuts. They're the same ones I use on the belt crank assembly, so I always have a nice supply of them. And I think that'll hopefully beef that up enough. I already got the tank shimmed in place. That's going to be hopeful. See, every time I do this, in a way, if I'm going to have to take this whole thing apart, and it comes apart relatively easy, at least I know all the adjustments now. Even in those few flights I had this morning, which we're watching back and forth, the thing I can do is look for things like it's slower inverted, or the motors aren't braking the way they were, and because this one obviously wasn't even held in with bolts, I guess you don't get the 2.4 run that you really expect unless the motors, both the motors and the tanks are tight. So I already put on the bigger nose wheel, give us a little more prop clearance. We're going to try to set this up for the 11-inch props, but I'm going to go through all the props. Now, these are all the props that we've used on the B-25. Rebalance them, check the pitch on any of the carbon ones, make sure they haven't gone back to their original setting, And that should hopefully get us another test day while we're making up another cowl or repairing this one. And again, I'm trying to think this through. Think if there's some easy way to repair this, even just to keep it as a spare cowl. But boy, if you had to carve another piece of balsa wood now, that mold has saved my life. Imagine I've gone around and checked all of the other parts of the plane, all of the other screws, to make sure nothing else is loose, that the gear blocks aren't loose, nothing's loose. Tip rate box is another candidate for a tightening. I'll pull off the bottom hatch, that comes right off, and check that all my wing retaining bolts are tight. And hopefully I've learned a good lesson. We lost the air filter. I'm going to have to get another air filter, but we've learned something. I think we've moved on to the first rung of getting this trimmed out. Flushed the original filters that we had in there, which were crap traps, and I'm going to retrofit. You can see how much smaller the Rojet filters are. Just give me a little more room. This was kind of really kinked up in the front. In fact, I don't know if you can see how. Maybe you can't even see it. It had a pretty good kink in it, and there was no way I could move it around. But these have solved the problem, and as a bonus, they're a little bit lighter. And they get them right from Rich Oliver. Oh, we've got this taped and JB welded up as a temporary cowl. Took the bottom off again. Checked all the screws, everything looks tight. And I guess I'm going to button this up, get ready for another flying session. Whenever that day is going to come. Tomorrow is Jimmy Borelli's christening, so we're not going to be able to fly tomorrow, but possibly Monday. And in the meantime, I can be working on making up a new cowl, getting a cowl mounts, and getting it painted. Today's the day we went to Jim Borelli's daughter's first communion. This is the first time we've seen Jimmy's house with the new porch on it. He did a lot of work here. All the guys that hang out with Jim have been doing them Sunday night or Sunday day building sessions here. And we're back from the communion. Maybe we're going to see some of the models they're working on. It's not easy being Bob Lampione.
I feel like Mike Savino, I'll tell you lately. I lean over to one side.
You look like you look drunk. You been having a lot to drink or what?
Nah, my back is. I woke up this morning, I couldn't move. Isn't that long going?
Well, let's see this beautiful plane you've been working on.
Oh, it's not here. I finally took it home to finish the clear.
You don't have the plane. You might drove out here 2 hours, and you don't have the Sabre, which we've been promised that everybody's going to see.
The Sabre and the Cavalier. Well, the Sabre.
You got nothing, in other words. Bupkis. I came out here for nothing. I came out here for nothing. You promised me planes.
I'm here.
What a phony.
Look at that plant. Wow.
He takes a lot of pride of doing his lawn and his landscaping, and does this all himself.
Can't go out on the red. No, not with those white shoes.
No?
So say hello to all the Windy Video subscribers. Hey, hello. Windy's the handsomest guy. Princess Fiona over here.
Things from everyone that she wanted on it. So there's a...
Well, from all our friends.
No, not friends. This is
No, there's a leaf from her godmother's.
Here we are on the way to the field, and guess what? Our little friends are growing up. And back by the house this morning, I noticed we have a cardinal making a nest right in our backyard. Boy, oh boy, talk about birth control. Holy mackerel. That's a brood. It looks like, well, for all purposes, a storm is coming in here quicker than we can get a flight in. And actually, I took 2 flights on this Jerry Phelps prop. I wanted to do a little pitching with the other props I have today, but I didn't get enough data to really make the day worthwhile. So basically it just was a day of exercise and waiting for the storm to go through. And I think it'll give us an opportunity to go home and work on making up that new cowl today. We'll probably get more done at home than if we stay out here. In fact, we're the only ones at the field. Us and the geese. But anyway, I did get a couple of flights on this prop, and now I have a good square one for pitching up my other two props. They're a 4, what am I talking about? 3. Now, it looks like they had a great fun fly out here. We were out by Borelli's, of course, but he didn't have any of the planes. I was hoping to get some pictures of Lampion's plane. But they did have their first fun fly of the season here. I see the park bench was used, but you know, the truth is, a lot of times a day like today, it's better to quit while you're ahead, and I think this is certainly going to be one of them, because we do have a lot of work to do on those cowls. I want to get the cowl fixed. You know, this was a terrible flying day. We have something really exciting going on down here. You see what I've done? I've had to block off this little entryway to the backyard, because right up here, and I know I'm not going to be able to see her, she's in the tree, but right up there, a female cardinal is sitting on eggs. Right there is her nest. And when I was loading and unloading stuff, she really gets protected. In fact, you can hear her squawking in the background. Cardinals. Anyway, we're gonna be able to view her from up and right out this window. We can see her every morning when Karen and I have our coffee. So I've just put this in the way. We're gonna unload the van and start working on those cowls. One cowl. Honey pie, we didn't get to fly it today, but I did make a temporary repair just in case we would get a chance to go flying. But now what I want to do is, I have and this is one of the spare cowls we had. Last night I glued in with secondary bonding resin. And there's not much point in going step by step on this, how we're going to set it up and finish it. But this was the key thing. The key thing is, imagine having to carve this out of balsa wood. Of course, we have it molded. That's going to save us a lot of time. The other thing, too, I have this really critical. I have this pattern for the bolts. Because right now, to establish that bolt hole pattern on there, without having a pattern, if I had I'd be making Swiss cheese out of it. At least this will make it a little bit easier for us to do the repair, I hope. I hope this is really going to be successful now. And we have the motor. Let's hope lock nutted in for it's never going to come out again. Anyway, we have to get our little spacers. Rich Oliver's machining us up some special little spacers. Tom Hampshire's going to make us some extra nuts that have some threads in them that are helicoil steel threads. So basically what I'm going to try to do is use what amounted to be, it looked like it was going to be a nice day, but it turned into a goose day and a bird nesting day. Pull this apart, try to get my new cowling fit, and different than what I did the first time. I'm trying to get all the holes in, all the holes for the cowling mount. Then I can put this one back on and then just worry about finishing it. And I can, if we do get a fly-in day this week, at least be able to fly the plane while the paint is drying on the what's going to be the replacement cowl. Some thought had occurred to me that how smart it was to have patterns. Now we have a pattern for this hole, of course. We have a pattern for where this goes. Anyway, where we stand right now, from this point on, we got the red on the new cowling drying. These little parts that are going to be our lucky box supports, reinforcements, and adjustments. And we'll try to get more of that on the end of this tape. I'm sorry we lost the sound, actually on both of these tapes that I condensed into what you have up to right now. Is, well, we didn't want to lose the first flight, we didn't want to lose a lot of those little steps in the story, but from this point on we're going to try to retrofit another cowl. We're going to make a rack that both of the bombers can sit somewhere a little safer. You can see what's happened. They basically have taken over like two dinosaurs in here. We're going to make a rack that they go somewhere in this corner. And we're going to buy the material tonight and probably work on that tomorrow. Oh, we finally got a little break in the nasty weather here. I'm inking up the cowl, airbrushing it. Going to get the clear on it today, I hope. And maybe tomorrow, the day after, we'll get all our little adjustable lucky box parts put on it. Looking forward to getting rid of this broken cowling as soon as possible. It hurts just looking at that. It's painful. But then all education is painful. know, today we got a great day to spray some clear, and I got these little parts. I want to do the cowl too. Oh, when the weather's like this, it's a pleasure to paint. So I'm going to get some clear on the cowls, and we'll be ready to put the A26 back together to fly this weekend. It's worth waiting for a day like today. The way the clear dries up on a day like today is beautiful. And they're predicting some nice weather in the next couple of days, so looks like what we've really done is used up some really crappy days to do this repair. And hopefully get another flying session in this week, and boy, the wind is blowing today. There's just no substitute for having a nice day for painting. And when the weather's not in your favor, it's almost impossible to get the paint to lay down the way, well, the way I want anyway. The only thing I gotta worry about is that the paint is gonna blow out of my hand here. But we'll do everything we can to try to get ready for this weekend. Really is going to get some flights in on this again. And hopefully have all the bolts tightened this time. And thanks to having a mold for this and having Rodak dope, a fraction of the time. If we had to carve this piece out of wood and paint it with some other brand of finish, oh man, it caused a lot of emotional distress. And as you can see, I hope you can see that the paint is really laying down here. Paint is behaving today. This kind of weather, 75, 80 degrees and very little humidity, makes for some very nice painting. Here's our first coat of clear going down right now. Now today we're going to buff out the cowl, and even though we should wait a little bit longer to buff it out, I just want to get it done. And I want to see if these little clamps that I made for the Lucky boxes are going to be of any value, if they're going to work. If not, it's not a big deal. We just leave them off. And get rid of, really been annoying to get rid of this busted up cowl, and just keep that for whatever use it would be in the future as a reminder to tighten the bolts. And then if Les can make it today, we have all our piping material. What we're going to try to do is over here, somewhere in this area of the cellar, make a rack that'll hold the both bombers up off the floor. But a nice thing, this was about 18 hours ago that we sprayed this. And we can do a quick little buff out on it. I'm not going to make myself crazy, I just want to have it that it matches the rest of the plane. Every time I have to do a repair and I want to make up time, because again we're trying to get the plane ready for this weekend coming up, and one of the things we want to do is I'd like to get those little Lucky box supports on. I'd like to get, just for a test, I'd like to get, if we have another rainy day, and it looks like we got another one coming, we're going to make up the grass gear, the longer gear, which will allow us to use the bigger props and allow us to fly off grass when that time comes, if and when it comes. Again, I always like to have a set of grass gear, a little bit longer. Rodak Dope is an amazing, amazing product. Now here it is, only a few days after we actually had the cowl and just raw carbon fiber, and here it is. And that's about all I'm going to do. I'm not going to make myself crazy here with this. But just to show how quickly that material buffs up.
I really can't wait to get that off of there.
Anyway, finally got the cowl on. Next thing is going to be our little clamps, and I buffed these out. Again, I don't know. Let's get these out here. The idea being that this would be on the top. It's got a blind nut in it. This piece would go underneath, right over where the horn slides in the Lucky Box, and act like a little adjustable clamp. So by tightening or loosening it, you could take some of the play out or put some of the play in. As the Lucky Boxes wear, we'd be able to take up the play, and I suspect, at the end of a season, or see, what I don't want to have happen is that halfway through the season it wears and I want to adjust it. Then I'd rather do it right now. It's easier to do it right now. Like, it's easier to buy a spare tire before you go out, well, before you go to Texas anyway. And we've looked at the video enough times to know we need a flap tweak. We're going to need to tweak this flap up. So choice one would be, once we get this adjusted how we want it, is to take the outer flap, bring it up maybe a 64th or 16th of an inch, or in the worst of all worlds, if we're at the field and we're in a rush, just tape on a trim tab until we get the ring to sit relatively level. And of course that and the longer gear, and we don't need the gear for the weekend because we'll be flying on tar. We'll be flying at Richfield Park, but it really would be nice to have that as an option when we get out to Brodax, and when, sometimes we may want to go to contests where, like Northampton, where they fly off grass. So we need to have that. There's just not enough clearance with this gear. On tar it would be fine, but it's really too close with 11-inch props. And so we're hoping we're going to be able to test props up to 11 inches eventually. So may as well make it now rather than wait. Use up these rainy days. And see how that's going to clamp on there. Well, I think you get the idea. That's going to clamp through there, and that'll give me a little bit of a vice to just have complete control over how much pressure is on those Lucky Boxes as they wear. It actually worked out as well as I can expect, and that'll give me a lot more options on controlling the wear of the Lucky Boxes. And what's happened, this is unbelievable. You can't believe it's another day of rain. We're getting killed with this rain. More rain. Great for the flowers, not good for flying. What's going on here? Just crappy weather. And here we rushed to get that cowling done, but anyway, we're going to try to make up this rack to hold the planes now instead. Really is a problem having both of these guys in here. So we're going to try to, we bought some PVC pipe, we're going to try to engineer up some kind of a rack to get these out of the way. Then I can keep this rack just for doing maintenance and working on it upside down and things, but having both of these guys in here, it's really getting crowded. Like this is the only room left in the whole shop. First thing I try to do is figure out the dimension I need to go forward, then the dimension I need between the nacelles, and just temporarily set up some of this PVC pipe. But we're certainly open to moving this around and trying some different things. Let me get the phone. We found another good use for these tools that Les bought. Evening out, what we want to get the heights exactly the same. We'll put the laser level on it too. I knew that'd get you. Boom! had to reinforce the tabletop because these bombers weigh 25 pounds each. Look at this guy grinding away. Chicky is so impressed. You and I could go in a plumbing business.
Speak for yourself.
I thought you were retired.
I'm in the business of retirement. By and large.
Engineered by the master of PVC racking. And we're hoping this is going to solve our, where do we put the bombers while we're making carbon fiber landing gear problems?
This is what we need.
We have to figure, see, this takes all the weight going up and down, and now we just need to make sure this can't go front to back with some kind of a little confinement issue. So let's see, there it is, baby. Now the last thing is just trying to see if it's going to be convenient, because we're going to rearrange some of our other stuff around here. Try to just make a little bit more reliable place to put stuff. That really gives us a lot of choices now. Now you got the use of the top shelf. You have the bombers in storage. You have the access to the drawers. And you have this, you freed up the whole other work table. So, nice little thing. One day's work. Yeah, that's just as good as it gets. You know, we really could have got one more plane up top. Not really, see, because there's just an inch. Yeah, you'd be pushing it to get the third plane in there. Besides, when I build a Tiger Cat next year, I'm going to buy a bigger house, I think. Now today, our number one goal is going to be, if time permits, we're going to make up the longer grass gear, very similar to how we made these up, but we want to have a little extra clearance for running our bigger props. So the first thing, step by step of course, the first thing is to get the wires bent up. And this way, even if we don't finish them today, at least we can get that one step done, get the wires all aligned for a nice straight rollout, and then we can put the details on. And it's styrene. I've already got my box of styrene out. The box of styrene from Ed Cotton just really made making the details on these gear very, very easy. We did it in one day, and we're going to try to maybe even make the second set in a day. And if we have any extra time, we'll make up our set of wheels. One of the things we really were very happy about on the B-25 was the really lightweight set of wheels we made using lightened up Dave Brown hubs and the treaded tires from the Hobby Lobby wheels. That wound up being a nice thing because, again, these planes all have the vertical CG much lower, and so any weight you can get off the bottom of the plane is really a big benefit. And our rack, of course, has just really worked out well. Thank you, Wes Demet. Take the dimensions off the wires. I'm just going to add, I want the axle to be longer, but I want it to be exactly the same length longer, so that what will happen is, hopefully, when we have our longer grass gear, we'll be able to, well, hopefully maintain the same angle of attack. We took a lot of time, and of course the sound was lost, making up these original gear, and we got just about the size we want. But what I'm going to do is extend the nose wheel about 1/8 of an inch more, because I'd like to make, it would be more scale to have a slightly smaller nose wheel. So, and because we can vary the sizes of the wheels incrementally to adjust that takeoff angle. Having that takeoff angle, it took a long time on a B-25 to get it so it just rolls right out. If it's down just a little bit, it wants to stay on the ground forever, and then when you give it up, it jumps off the ground. And the other part, if it's up, it'll take off in 3 feet. So we're really looking, this is one of the little fine adjustments that I really want to take my time and get the wires exactly right. The things I thought I'd try, I don't know if this is going to work, but I figure it's a good thing to do on video. Since I want these gear, the two back gear, to be exactly the same height, I thought, well, why not just try bending them both at the same time? And since this is a heavy-duty wire bender, well, we're very conveniently able to do that. And I tried the first two bends, and I said, gee, why didn't I think of this before, you know? See, this is the kind of thing when you're sometimes in the heat of battle, you don't think of the easy things. Now I wanted to extend this an inch. So what I need to do now is just measure this up. At 3, I want to be at 4. Again, since this is an experiment, we don't really have to worry. Let's see, this dimension is 3.2. We like it to be 4.2. Every plane I have has a set of grass landing gear and a set of paved landing gear. That's kind of standard issue stuff. Let's see, we could go just a hair more and see if we have it. Again, bending wire. Now this is 2 at a time, so let's see, make sure we haven't lost that dimension. The idea is not to bend it way more than 90, just enough that it springs back without having to bend it 2 or 3 times back. And what it looks like we might have figured out, well, it's a little bit off, because we've got 2 relatively equal pieces of wire. So now once they're trimmed, and assuming they're right, what I'm going to do is bend all the wires and put the bomber up on its feet and make sure I have all the angles I want before I go and put all those details on the gear. But that worked well. You can bend 2, probably could even bend 3 wires at once. It's a good little trick. I didn't think about that. See, you learn every day. You learn something new. The part that really takes time, because I have these right in line with the readout guide. This one's okay. It's this one. You check it from both angles. Make the bends accordingly. Final step is to get the 2 gear to line up. I think we can show them here. The 2 wires to line up perfectly. Check all 3 of the dimensions, top to bottom, front to back, and now we've got to work on making up another nose wheel. Bending and equalizing all the wires, like roughing up the part that the detailing is going to go on. Anywhere the detailing is going to go on, I want to have it rough. These are carved balsa pieces, these are styrene pieces, and this is a piece of aluminum tube. Again, if anybody's really fanatically and wants to make a set of these type of gear, I just get that tape that doesn't have the sound you can figure out by looking at the pictures. And I don't want to make this video go on and on and on about making landing gear. We've already made one set on this tape, but once I get those wires all equalized, the next step is going to be to put the plane up on its feet, make sure I have the right angles, and then just replicate all the details very similar to the original. The tricks, and each time I do this I try to come up with a better trick. I took this ball sword and just sharpened up a copper tube and took a piece out of a soft block, and really it just made the carving a lot easier. And I want it to be the diameter so I can make some of the details out of carbon fiber tube. So it looks like I've got that diameter pretty well. And now it's just a question of, well, that saved me quite a bit of work, sanding this down and getting all the little details made up out of the egg cotton styrene and the carbon fiber. I think that's a real time saver though. And bending 2 gear at once is another. So the point is, every time you do something like this, you learn something, or you have a chance to learn something. And I guess that's what makes this all so challenging. And what makes it ultimately challenging is when you see the final parts on the model. Ready for the first coat of silver here. We'll be ready to put those out in the sun. We got a nice sunny day for painting. Well, this turned out to be a halfway decent day even for spraying. Anyway, we got our first, we're going to get our first coat of silver on here. Because it's such a sunny day, this will dry in 15-20 minutes. I'm ready to put another coat on. That is definitely you're not going to need any retarder in the paint today, but what I try to do when I want to get a quick finish on something like this, of course it's got a base of CA. I'll get a coat of silver on, wet sand it out. Probably 600 will be fine. And within an hour I'll be having a second coat of silver on. And then I'm going to do some detailing with a brush. Oh, what a day this is. Woo! Wish we had all these things ready to go. We'd be flying today. And with this sun, it'll dry right up today. We've been having fun all day watching the cardinals go in and out of this nest. Oh, you can hear them. The minute you go near that nest, they start squawking. Well, after a second coat, this is starting to build up a nice finish. It just needs a very slight sanding. You can lay out and put the other coat on. And thanks to Rodak Dope drying so quickly, you really get a really nice jump on having this done in one day. Paint and all. Our male and female cardinals have been taking turns coming up to the feeder today. I hope she's out there by her eggs. I did. I put a little shading on these. Oh, you can see these in the sun. So we get a better view here. A little bit of shading. I made the scissors a little more intricate. I'm getting used to working with that styrene now, and it really is nice. As soon as this dries up, we're ready for some clear. As soon as this clear dries up, we'll give it a couple of coats. Probably won't even have to put any more paint on this. This will be fine. A piece of balsa wood. It's starting to look like some pretty intricate carving and sanding there. Actually, this set of gear looks a lot nicer than the other ones. Those little scissors with the little details look nice. And boy, Ed Cotton hit it right on the money. Sheet styrene, if you're going to make details like that. I can't wait to do a full cockpit again with sheet styrene. It'll be awesome. Anyway, once this clear dries up, we're ready to put the big props on the plane. We got the new prop nuts from Tom Hampshire, the big 11-inch props, and we're basically ready to go for another flying day. You saw it, the cardinal, the male cardinal just flew. What are you doing there? Now with the gear and the new wheels, the super light wheels installed, I think that really just adds a nice little dimension. Now, the reason we have these a little bit smaller than what they should be wheels, they're about 1/4 of an inch smaller than what they should be. The reason is because we really do have, with any plane like this, or even the B-25, you have a vertical CG issue that you need to deal with. Yeah, there's certainly a lot of ways to deal with a vertical CG not being exactly right on the money. In fact, this might be a good time for a little bit of a storyboard. So we're coming up on the end of the tape, and we're going to try to get out and fly this weekend, weather permitting. But we certainly have reached another watershed with this plane, that we've at least gotten it into the air, gotten a feel for how it's going to fly, and I think, as I've said before, I think it's going to be a good one. I'm very impressed with the way the styrene works and paints. And I think it's those little details that, to me, if you're not going to make a semi-scale plane, if you're going to make a traditional plane, well, you don't have to deal with little things like that. But I just like the little details. And when we originally envisioned the A26 project, I had no idea. First off, I didn't know if I'd be able to achieve the light weight that I've got. And we're about 70 ounces. But we also have a lot of possibilities to improve this. There's still a lot of things. Props, for instance, motor tuning, different things that we want to try. And we just need flight time now. We have the rack now, and that's going to be a big help. Let me do a little quick storyboard about this vertical CG, because this is something a lot of people don't realize how critical this is, and you can live with it being wrong, but it's a lot better if you can get it right. Let me do a quick storyboard here. Let's use a traditional stunt design, of which anyone would apply. When I say the vertical CG, where the lead-outs exit the wing, pretty much sets your vertical CG position. So if you were to draw a line right through the plane, what you'll notice, and this is what happens to virtually every plane, is you wind up with things that are below the CG. In this case, let's just get a feel for what's below the CG. A smaller than half amount of the body, the wheels. And what's above the CG? Well, if you really look at it carefully, you find out it's not exactly equal on most planes. Now, it can vary if you have an airplane or a design that's made for a certain motor. Let's say you have a traditional plane that's designed for a 6-ounce Fox 35, and you put in a heavier motor, you put in an 8-ounce motor. Well, remember, most of that motor is here. Guess where it is? What it does, it lowers the vertical CG of the plane. Now, if you use heavy wheels, in this case, wheels are the worst killer because they're really low. They lower the vertical CG. So what you always want to do, if you're in doubt, is balance the plane right here, and if the flap is in neutral, right here, with your two fingers and the outer tip down, and see which side needs either to remove weight, or in our case with the bomber, we don't want to add any weight to any of these planes ever. I'm trying to reduce the weight, and the bomber, because it has the motors, the wing is relatively high. What happens, and the lead-outs are coming out almost the bottom of the wing, it's still not right. It's close. Well, it's as close as we can make it. But what would make it better would be having the lightest wheels in the world. So we've really spent a lot of time, and all that information is on one of the B-25 videos where we made those custom wheels. Those wheels are as light as I can ever make them. I just can't picture a Cheerio would be lighter than that. Problem with the lightweight wheels, two things. When you let the plane sit in a van, they tend to go flat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little fixture of balsa wood the shape of the wheel for it to sit in when it's in the van. Hopefully that'll help from keeping it just get flat on the bottom. We're going to make these up in the next day or so. But keep in mind that vertical CG, you'd like to get it perfect, but if you can't, then you get it as close as you can. Another thing a lot of people add is a big heavy spinner, where it used to be on a design like a Nobler, a Vico spinner, and you put on a real heavy spinner. Modern spinners are a lot heavier than Vico spinners, and then that throws it off the other way. But you can always balance and figure out which way you really would like to have it. And of course, the ideal thing is to have the vertical CG and the lead-outs line up perfectly. Now, another test, another way to determine if the vertical CG is accurate, it's called the plumb bob test. And we've done this, and it's still off, even with the lightweight wheels, but we're going to learn to live with it, and we're going to learn to fly around it. Just makes it a little more difficult in certain parts of the pattern. But what you do is, in the ceiling of your house, put 2 eye hooks in beams, hopefully. They're in a garage. Hang the plane by the lead-outs, and it'll rock back and forth, but eventually it'll stabilize. And then somewhere in front of it, you want to take a plumb bob, and a weight, actually a couple of washers is even okay, and a piece of very fine thread. Dental floss works well, any kind of thread, or you can just use a plumb bob. So what happens now is, you know the plumb bob is going to be exactly straight. And what you do, you just eyeball it, and at some point in time, that string, this was a Bob Barron technique he worked out, you can sight right through the plumb bob and see if you're off. Now, in Bob's case, Bob had a thing that he used to do. He'd hang the model, because it was a monocoated model. It was easy to do this, right to the very end, and then move the lead-outs back or forward, and I think Rich Oliver does that too. And then put them in a little bit off center. I think they were a little bit low on an Avanti, but because you had this ability to do this, and then just monocoat that little piece over it. Well, we can't really do that. We're not going to be monocoating, but we're probably going to be trying other things. And by the way, another thing that happens to a lot of planes is, when you do this, if you have a design that's not designed for a tuned pipe, and you wind up putting a tuned pipe, a modern motor, and a 7-ounce gas tank, this is where they all wind up. And so what happens, and then if you resort to having the relatively heavy wheels, the ship gets bottom heavy, and then you really have a problem. And the only way to resolve that I know of is to move the lead-outs. There's really no way you can, well, some of the modern pipes are a lot lighter than the old ones, and you can make real light wheels and wheel pants, but you still, in the basic design of the plane, should be the consideration of the vertical CG. Anyway, just a couple of thoughts I thought would help. We're coming up on the end of this tape. We're ready to get another day of flying in, and I hope the weather's going to cooperate. I hope our female cardinal's going to be giving us some baby cardinals soon, and sooner or later I hope the vertical CG on this bomber. Well, I get it as close as I can, but I don't get frustrated if it isn't perfect, because it is a semi-scale plane. And there's always a compromise with a semi-scale plane you have to make. Now, of course, one of the choices you always would have on a semi-scale plane is make it less scale and more semi. In this case, we didn't want to do that. And especially on the B-25, I didn't want to compromise at all. I wanted to keep it just the way Dave Downey designed it. But even with the fact that it's off a little bit, it still looked pretty promising in those first flights. But we're going to find out this weekend coming up. We're really looking forward to that. And one of the things we have in our favor, and it's the thing you would have, if, as an example, you built a profile cardinal and another one, you could use things that you learned or things that you developed on the original plane to upgrade the second one very early on in the trim. Now, in this case, one of the things that we spent a lot of time making are these wheels, and that's on the B-25 video. Now, the original 3 wheels that we had, when you take all 3 of them together, they really were heavy. They really aren't as light as you think they are when you put 3 of them way below the CG. Now, in the gear, they're very long now. These gear are even longer, the grass gear. But this is what I'm going to call transportable development. It's things you can learn on one plane, and right away, you can use those right away to help trim the second plane. Now, there's a lot of other things that worked out very well on the B-25. One of the things that makes a plane like this possible the B-25, when we originally started out, was really marginal on how much weight that wing would carry. And so we had to really fish for, and we had already made carbon fiber tanks, but we were able to determine that these were going to work, and that knocked, before we ever even experimented with tanks, we had the lightest tanks that we possibly could have in a plane. Now, these are things that if you added 1.5 ounces each for the metal tanks, you're adding 3 ounces to the plane. If you add the wheels, I'm sure you're adding another ounce. Now you're up to 4. One thing at a time, and all of a sudden the weight becomes an issue. Now, one of the reasons this plane is basically 70 ounces and this one is basically 80 or 79, that 10 ounces of difference, we did a lot of little things along the way to make that lighter, the biggest of which is there's a little bit less clear on the plane, and I've buffed a lot of it off. But all of these things that originally start, when you start with one ship and you build a very similar ship with the same ship, here's the biggest one of all, and this is the one that I hope is going to save us time. Now, even though we have different engines in each plane, we have a set of matched props. We actually have 3 or 4 sets of matched props that we can experiment with and test. It took just day after day of experimenting to get to that point with the props. But you would think, hopefully, the props that worked on the B-25 are going to be very easy to make work on the A-26. So when you start looking at some of the things that were basic development things during that time and wound up in both planes, it makes the development of things worthwhile. When you look around and you can at least, if you're going to come up with something like lightweight wheels, knowing you can use them in the future, or the real light carbon fiber tanks, well, the props with the right pitch, well, and one of the biggest ones, the MagJet motors. Now Rich Oliver hasn't decided whether they're MagJets, Romags, or whatever. But the weight of these new engines is about 1.5 ounces lighter on each engine, so that was 3 ounces. So you see, when you take all these things into account, 80 can become 70, and it could be possible that if we were anticipating somewhere in the future, maybe next year, maybe not, because we still want to do our electric project, we still want to do the Testarossa, but one of the things we've thought about is doing a Tiger Cat. And then with the Tiger Cat, we would like to, if possible, build on the 3rd level of technology and maybe even get that lighter. But that's the fun of development, and that's what's challenging, and that's what makes me get excited about coming down to the shop in the morning. Just things like that. Now, we've come up on a time that I feel it's safe to use real Carnauba wax. Now, I've used this spray wax. Let me show this anyway. This is a real nice product just to clean up your model. Problem is, it doesn't really leave a lot of lasting protection. The next 2 or 3 days you fly it and it's gone. But it's a good cleanup wax. That's real nice. What I like to have as a second choice, and there's a million of those spray waxes, Meguiar's is good too. Some of these you want to really be careful of. Some of these waxes can really hurt a finish. If you put these on in bright sun, you can really be a problem. Now, this is a good wax, but there's one wax that's the best of all. Let me just share this with you. When you're going to fly the plane every day, and you're going to get, the finish should dry out with no wax on it right up until a day or two before you fly it. You don't want to wax it prematurely. But what you want to look for is Carnauba. Now, Carnauba is the ingredient in wax that makes it work. You'll always see if Carnauba is the last ingredient, if the ingredients are and here's Carnauba, that's junk wax. That's not going to do you a whole lot of good. You like Carnauba to be the first ingredient, or in some cases the only ingredient, and you can buy. Now, when you put the kind of time and energy into a finish that most of us do, you really want to have as much Carnauba wax as possible. Simonize. Some of the products are 100% Carnauba. Now, the only downside is it really takes time to put them on and take it. Waxing a plane can take an hour. But once you've waxed it, it's going to be waxed for quite a while. It's not going to just, like this liquid wax that just the next day will pledge. It's nice. It gets the oil off. But you'd like to get, and we're going to try to do this afternoon, get a coat of raw Carnauba right on the plane, because we've already flown it, but it's going to start taking a beating. There's no doubt about it. Sooner or later, the dust, the dirt, the grime, the sun. And you want to look for a product that's either Simonize, look on the label and see if it's all Carnauba or most Carnauba. And if you want to wax a bird, Chicky, we don't want to hear that, your opinion of life. He's jealous that cardinal's having babies outside. Now, if you notice, pure carnauba without cleaner. That means clean the plane with DuPont or Total Wax or whatever. But if you look on here, where are the ingredients anyway? There's no ingredients. It's pure carnauba. A can of this is basically Simonized. A can of this is really expensive. And I want to share a secret with you. It's not a secret, just a good tip. When you're going to go flying, you can see how much I've used of this. In fact, it's time to buy another can. But this wax, when you wax a ship with this real wax, you've got something. It's going to last, and it's going to protect it. So my advice is, in fact, we're going to do it today. Spend that hour or two and really take your time and get that good coat of carnauba on at least once a month if you fly every other day or so. You'll know when it wears out. Because you take it off as you wipe the plane off. But this is a tip worth its weight in carnauba. On the food scale of wax, carnauba is at the top. And all these things, these liquids and all the other things, they're okay. But this is the king. When you want to have a wax finish that's going to last and going to protect your plane, carnauba is it. One of the parts, everybody seems to, it takes time to put carnauba wax on. They always give you a little sponge with it. It's always good to keep it just a tad damp. And I can tell you right now, this will be, in my case, a very pleasant hour because I really want to protect the finisher on this. I've put a lot of time and energy into the finish, and there's really nothing that's going to do it like carnauba wax. You can buy all the other products in the world you want, but when you, especially if you have a single engine plane and up on the nose or the cowling, you want to get that part. In my case, I want to have the nacelles. I want to do one little spot like this at a time. It sounds like something you'd say, oh yeah, everybody knows that. Yeah. Be surprised how many people don't understand how important it is to have a coat of wax. You can even feel a coat of wax on the plane at some point in time. Now, it's always good. You just let it dry to a little bit of a haze. And I use Bounty paper towels to take it off. And I try to do one little spot at a time. Wherever the engines are, a double or a triple coat, and wherever the people are going to launch the plane from. Because here's what happens. People have fuel on their hands. They touch something, they get dirty, then they go and launch your plane. They squeeze it. Well, you've got little scratches in the back of the plane. Let's dry a minute or two. The thing people always resist about carnauba wax is the fact that it's hard to wipe it off. You get spoiled by these modern waxes, but the modern waxes really aren't doing it anywhere near the amount of protection that the carnauba is. And the environment where we fly is kind of dusty, kind of dirty, thanks to our friends the Canada Geese. But if you can see the finish on this, now it's not only that you see the finish. The finish, of course, is shiny and smooth. Here's what you can always do. Just rub the back of your hand on it, and then rub a part that isn't done yet. You can actually feel a difference. It really is worth the time, and that's going to be the next thing we're going to do before we get down the flying field, is wax that whole plane. Well, we're all waxed up. The weather report is marginal for tomorrow. And we're at the end of this tape, and I really hope you've gotten some good ideas. Something that, something that would just make the sport itself more enjoyable. I guess the biggest tip really was making up those little styrene parts for the gear. We have become a big fan of styrene.
And the clouds will roll away to the honeymoon shining down. We should make a soul.
And we hope we'll see you on the next tape.
rise up, till the day when you belong to me, and the clouds will roll away.